My name's Planky, I'm from Microsoft, I'm an evangelist, and we're going to talk about Windows Azure websites. So what the agenda is basically 4 topics. I want to talk about moving ourselves up the food chain in terms of when we write applications and we deliver those applications to the users. There's a whole load of necessity that we have to concentrate on, which is the underlying infrastructure. So for example, one of the things you have to deal with is IIS if you write a web app. One of the things you probably have to deal with, maybe if you're purely in a development team and all you do is development, maybe scripts for IIS configuration and the code itself is what you deal with. Maybe if you're in the DevOps world, then perhaps you also have to deal with the platform that it's running on, whether it's a PHP or a Java application or a .NET application. You have to also worry about the operating system and the underlying hardware, and it gets deeper and deeper. All of that stuff is a necessity. So what websites tries to do is it tries to move us up the value chain. I want to talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about is scaling. So we can scale our websites up by putting them onto more powerful machinery. But one of the key benefits, one of the key things about Windows Azure is the ease with which you can scale out. I mean, you've been able to scale IIS-type websites with load balancers, I don't know, for at least, when did IIS come out? 1994, was it? No, 95, wasn't it? When Windows 95 was released, it was in the server edition of the same time. I've been in Microsoft for almost 20 years, so it's kind of, there's a whole history of stuff in the background there. And really, since then, you've been able to scale things. But, how do you make that easy? And how do you take away the responsibility of when you want to scale something out or scale it back and you add or remove a node, that something might go wrong? And it's what it's basically doing is reducing the risk. So I'm going to talk about free, shared and reserved instances. That will mean nothing to you right now, but it's a way of getting your website resources. Then we're going to talk about deploying your code. I'll do a demo of FTP, web deploy and TFS. I won't do a demo of Git. But you can use all of those methods to get your code onto a running IIS server. And then I'll talk about the partner gallery. So in terms of pre-packaged, pre-configured Windows Azure websites applications, we've worked very closely with Umbraco and WordPress and Joomla and all those kind of CMS and blog and commercial, what they call a commerce server type application, the open source ones, to get them to work really well in Windows Azure. So you don't have to go away and get hold of one of these packages and then go through the process of installing it. You just run through a wizard and it will create a WordPress blog for you, for example. Okay, so what I'm aiming to do is to go through this really to sort of get through the, if you like, the theory part of this, and then do a whole bunch of demos. So hopefully that'll work. As I go through this, I might just randomly sort of think, oh, it might be nice to show this in a demo, and I might dip into it. But hopefully the slides themselves won't take very long, and they're not really slides, they're mini videos that I've created. So I was talking about moving up the food chain, and if you compare your on-premises world with the Windows Azure world, then there is this entire stack that you have to manage. You've got to look after the hardware, the virtualization, the operating system, things like the network configuration, firewall configuration, data, and the value is in the application that's at the top. Now in Windows Azure, we've got basically 3 ways of doing compute. There's more than that, but the 3 main ways: virtual machines, cloud services, and websites. So what we do with virtual machines is we take away some of that responsibility from you. So we'll take away management of the hardware and the virtualization, and you can move the entire rest of your stack over. You can literally copy it in a VHD. Cloud services, we take away even more of that responsibility. So we take away the responsibility to manage the operating system. So you don't do operating system management, monitoring, any of that stuff. And you can move your stuff. You can't literally move it. You can't migrate it. You have to write it to run in that environment. So the idea of websites is to get a website up running very quickly. And you can do that because we take over almost all of the management of the infrastructure. All you really end up with is a project. Let's just say you're using Visual Studio. You end up with a project in Visual Studio, and you hit the publish button. That's basically, that's kind of the idea. You can use other tools to deploy it, but if you're in the Microsoft world and you're using Microsoft tools, that's the way it will work. So what we're really trying to do here is move towards where the value is, because the value is in the application, it's not in the underlying infrastructure. I'm sure, you know, in managing infrastructure is an interesting job. It's a nice sort of absorbing, captivating sort of thing to do, but it's something that we have to do. It's not something that, well, there are people who want to do it, but you know, it's just there to support the applications which are written, and they give some value to the organization or to the person that's using them. Okay, so we have this idea. I want you to just watch my fancy drawing here. I think I did rather good on this. Look at that little website's logo, colored in and everything. So with websites, we talk about three things. We talk about websites in seconds, and we break that down into start simple. So that really consists of free websites, so you can get up to 10 free websites. You can scale them up and you can scale them out. We talk about the types of code, and currently it's ASP, ASP.NET, PHP, Node.js. Those are frameworks which are already installed into this environment, but in the future you'll see more and more of the popular open source type frameworks pre-installed into websites so that you don't have to go through lots of sort of jiggery-pokery and configuration. So today, for example, if you want to run Ruby on Rails, you can't do it on websites. You can do it on Windows Azure Cloud Services. There's nothing built into Windows Azure Cloud Services to allow you to do that, but Cloud Services allows you to get access to more of the guts of the machinery and the infrastructure than websites do. And so that allows you to therefore go through the process of installing all the stuff that you need to get Ruby on Rails running. So at the moment, you know, we've got kind of what ASP, ASP.NET, PHP, Node.js, those are kind of the really popular web platforms. So those are the things that are there at the moment. And all you'll see is over time, you know, the next popular thing will be introduced, the next popular thing will be introduced, the next popular thing will be introduced. And then the idea also, by linking this very closely with that protocol called Web Deploy. Does anybody use Web Deploy in Visual Studio or Web Matrix? It's just a really neat way of deploying stuff. By taking Windows Azure websites and exposing that functionality into tools like Web Matrix, Team Foundation Server, or Service. You know, there's a service you can log on to. Did you all know that? There's TFS, Team Foundation Server, which you install in your on-premises environment. You can also go to tfs.visualstudio.com and you can create a free account for yourself to just log in and use that. I'll use that today. So, you know, linking the site and the infrastructure in with those kind of services just makes it a lot easier to get stuff deployed, so that what you can concentrate on is actually writing the code and the functionality and making the website that you're going to deploy good. Question?
Is Web Deploy the same as the publish button on the... Okay.
That's it, yeah.
Cool,
yeah.
Cool, cool, yeah.
So Web Deploy is actually a protocol, and it's a way of getting the two endpoints to talk to each other to receive your website. So we talk about Web Deploy, but what you see is a button that says publish. Yeah.
So just to clarify, could you put other JavaScripts on there as well? Or
sorry, could you put JavaScript on there?
ASP and ASP.NET is pre-installed.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I'm using Bootstrap.
Okay.
Could I put that on there?
No. So if you need any type of framework in, you know, underlying your application, then if you could do that through Web Deploy, yes. But what you'll actually find is that what you typically will need to do is to either go to a Windows Azure Cloud service and run a startup task which will install that framework underneath for you, so that all those APIs are there available for you to call, or go to, you know, the real low end of the whole thing is create a virtual machine and just go through the installation process. So at the moment, these are the frameworks which are supported for Windows Azure websites. But we will see more and more coming as time goes on. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that there was no support for Node.js, for example. Okay, now, as far as scaling is concerned, we have 3 modes that the websites can operate in, and it's called free, shared, and reserved. So if we look at free, there's a massive infrastructure of Windows Azure hypervisors running a massive infrastructure of tens of thousands of virtual machines with IIS installed, and each one of those IIS servers has many, many websites on it from many, many customers. So if you create websites, it'll be your websites on there and other people's websites as well. So you're in a shared infrastructure when you use the free service. So you can see here we've got an example of, most of these VMs have got 2 websites on them. Actually, they will have many, many more. I don't know how many they've got, but they'll have lots more than 2 websites on them. When we move over to the shared infrastructure, that then allows us to actually scale our website out, to spread it across multiple instances. So I can use a slider and I can slide it across to, say, 3 instances. And then what will happen is my website will be copied to 3 other boxes. All of the infrastructure is still shared, but then connected up to a load balancer, which is connected to the internet. And of course, what that then means is that when requests come in from the internet, they get load balanced across a number of different boxes. It's not exactly round-robin load balancing. What it will try to do is, if the load is low, it will try to create stickiness between the request from your browser and the website that it's going to. So we'll try it today. I mean, if any people have got laptops, well, I don't think we've got enough people who've got them out. We could try and create a website and try and give it enough traffic to load balance. But typically, you'll only see it actually, doing this kind of thing if you've got lots of clients and you can actually see the load balancing working. Excuse me.
In the free environment, what kind of confidentiality is there between one box and another?
It's
someone's paranoid about theft.
Yeah. So your worry is things like you've got 2 websites on the same machine, so they're sharing the same storage infrastructure. So somebody could do, the walk the tree, they go up a few directories and then they sort of start working their way down into yours and start interfering with your site. So the protection that you have is the protection that exists on Windows Server and IIS. Okay, so that's the protection that you have. So if that is something that worries you, if you feel as though just simply having some other website on the same box of you as you introduces a risk, that's when you would want to move to the reserved mode. Okay, so that's kind of one of the reasons why people tend to move to the reserved mode, is because they say, if I'm in a multi-tenant environment on a single server, then there may be exploits that haven't been found yet that could be executed and could attack me. Okay, so that's one of those sort of risk appetite decisions that you'll end up making. And of course, free is free. Shared costs a bit of money. Reserve costs more money. So you kind of, you're paying for the extra isolation that you get when you make that decision. Okay, so I just want to talk about this Azure hypervisors. When I say Hyper-V, does anybody not know what Hyper-V is? Okay, so Hyper-V is, VMware. It's a virtualization technology. You install operating systems on top of a server. So you may have a server with one operating system on it and you can have lots of other ones on top of that. It's a way of virtualizing the environment. Hyper-V is Microsoft's version of that. It's a virtualization environment. It uses hypervisors which are built into the chipsets which make emulating the hardware environment in software much easier. And so we have this complete private cloud infrastructure based around Hyper-V. So you can build your own private cloud if you want to in your own data center, and you use technologies like Hyper-V and System Center to do that. So it's a pretty advanced, highly configurable set of technologies. A lot of people think that the virtual machines that we run in Windows Azure run on Hyper-V. And what they run on is a modified version of Hyper-V, which has been optimized to run in a public cloud data center. So a couple of examples are, for example, every virtual machine has an agent installed onto it, and that agent, that's how the underlying infrastructure communicates with the virtual machine. The agent, oops, excuse me, let me just stop my phone from ringing. The agent also releases a heartbeat. Every 1 minute, it'll be a heartbeat. And then there's another agent which exists on the hypervisor that agent is sat on, that VM is sat on. So imagine you've got a hypervisor. It's got, let's just say it's got 10 VMs on it, or probably 8 actually, but 8 VMs on it. Every minute is expecting to get a signal from each of the guest operating systems that's running on it. And then what it does with that is, if it's still alive, it ignores it. It says, right, that VM is okay. If it's not alive, then it communicates with another hypervisor, which is kind of like the chief hypervisor for that cluster, or stamp as we call it. And that cluster will have 1,000 nodes in it. So we'll have 1,000 nodes with something that's in charge of managing that. And then that hypervisor will communicate with a thing called the fabric controller, which is something that runs the entire fabric that automates this process throughout the entire data center. So none of that kind of facility exists in Hyper-V that you run in your on-premises environment. So this is specialized stuff, you know, the pure virtualization technology, how you get, you know, a set of instructions and emulate that set of machine instructions in an emulated environment on top of a single piece of hardware. That's the same, but the whole management piece of it is different. So you just have to be aware of that. And you know, the data centers, there are 8 data centers around the world. There's 2 in Europe, North Europe, and West Europe. They're Amsterdam and Dublin. So here's the good question. Which one is Amsterdam? Is that North Europe or West Europe?
West Europe.
It is, yeah. Even though Dublin is further west than Amsterdam, I don't know why they did that. One sort of reason I heard was that Amsterdam was the first data center that was enabled for Azure, and it's in West Europe, so they called it West Europe. And then they decided to put one in Dublin, and they said, well, what are we going to call that? Because it's even further west than Amsterdam. So, well, it's in North Europe, let's call it North Europe. But there's an interesting thing here. The data centers get names which are, they're abstractions of the location. So for example, we don't call it Dublin, we don't call it Amsterdam, we call it North Europe or West Europe. Because you could imagine that if the data center was to ever move, you know, if you had lots of configuration and code that relied on the name, because you'd assume that that would never change, wouldn't you? So why would you ever want to sort of build configuration for that? So that's the whole idea of that, is that, you know, even at the data center level, there's large bits of abstraction. And the other thing I want to talk about the hypervisors is the way the data centers work. There are 4 types of data center. Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4. Gen 1, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's one of these data centers you walk in. As soon as you walk in through the front door, you can feel the fans. It's really loud. There's lots of air moving around. There's lots of flashing lights, lots of stuff in racks. Traditional data center. And then you go through Gen 2, Gen 3. When you get to the Gen 4 data center, basically what happens with the other generations is the density of the servers in a rack goes up. You get to a Gen 4 data center, and the servers are not inside a building. They're left outside in storage containers, so shipping containers. So they're in big 40-foot shipping containers. There's between 2,000 and 2,500 servers in a shipping container. And in the ideal operation, you know, in the perfect world, this is the way it works. Somebody decides they need more capacity in the data center. A truck turns up with a shipping container. They get the shipping container off the truck, they maneuver it into its position where it's going to be. It's not inside a building, as I said. It looks a little bit like Dover, you know, with all the containers all over the place. Razor wire and high grass banks and sort of security and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about stuff which is kind of, I would say, open to the elements, but it's all held inside a shipping container. 3 connections are made: power, network, and cooling. And then they walk away. And some hours later, the software, the fabric, will have communicated with all of the hypervisor host operating systems, or host nodes that are in that thing, will have installed all of them and will start to move workloads on there. It might be a number of Windows Azure websites, it might be a number of Windows Azure virtual machines, it might be cloud services, it might be mobile, it might be any type of the compute that we talk about. Okay, so this thing's running away, you know, and it runs at 90 degrees. So you would normally, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, not 90 degrees centigrade. They're run at a temperature which would be incredibly uncomfortable for a human to work in, because a human's never really expected to go inside the container. The reason that data centers are at the temperatures that they are and the cooling works in that way is because, you know, you've got people in there and they have to live, you have to survive. But you can run these things, you know, and there's even talk of running these at much higher temperatures than that, because the componentry on the circuit boards is much, it can run at something like 105 degrees centigrade. So why do you want to pay all that money and create all those greenhouse gases and all those kind of things to keep something cool, which doesn't need to be that cool, because there's never going to be a human inside the container in any case. So let's just say a server breaks, fails, hard disk fails. What happens in that case is the server will get marked as bad, which means it won't be used again. All the workloads that were on it, all the servers that were on it, all the websites, all the mobile services, whatever, they all get moved off that. They may be moved to some other servers inside the same container, or they may be moved to another container somewhere else. It doesn't really matter where they go, as long as there is fault isolation between the multiple instances. So in this case, we've got three servers hosting our website. Those 3 servers will be spread across 3 different routers, 3 different networks, 3 different battery backup units. In the case of storage containers, they'll be in 3 different containers, because containers have commonality in the network, the power, and the cooling. So if one of those was to fail and all 3 of your instances were in that container, your entire service would fail. Question?
If you had a user logged on to server A in the middle of transactions,
yeah,
that container failed,
yeah.
what would the experience of the user be?
It would be just the same as if you had a IIS server in your data center fail right in the middle of doing a transaction.
And that experience is?
Well, it depends what the user's doing. So if you've got somebody in the middle of doing something, that transaction gets lost. When it comes back up again, if you've got some code that is written to recover that transaction, it'll be recovered. In the case of this, each of the servers actually, what I'm about to say is wrong, but it's to give an example. Imagine you've got a file server at the back end, which is a common place where the data could be stored. The www root directory, which is where your site is built, is in that file server, and all of the servers point back to that common file store. So there's one common place where the data is held, if you like. Now, it's not actually a file server, it's a thing called Windows Azure Storage, and there's a blob. There's a data structure called a blob. You know what a blob is from databases. So there's a blob. A blob can be, I think, 1 terabyte in size. So you could have a website of which the functional part, the binaries and the JPEG images and all the stuff that you've got in there could be that large. So if your application is making a note of what it's doing as it goes along and this thing falls over, then when the user goes to, I don't know, hits the retry button or, does something like that, then what's going to happen is eventually the load balancer is going to notice that that server is no longer alive because there's no more heartbeat. It will take it neatly out of the configuration. So then the user's request comes back in again, and hopefully you've written code that says, oh, I can match up what that user was doing with the state that I've stored in the back-end storage or database.
Can you share across all 3 servers?
So, okay, I don't want you to get the impression that there is automatic session management here. You have to do that. Okay, so it's down to you as the developer to take care of session management. There's no, we have a sort of the vague idea of sticky sessions because this load balancer is a software load balancer developed by Microsoft. It's actually a Windows Azure service. And when it sees a request coming in, it sort of says, well, I know that that user has been going to that server. So what I would prefer to do is to route them toward that server. If, however, that server is really busy and it can't take any more requests, it will then start routing them to a different server. But that session state management is down to you. It's not down to anything that's automated inside the data center. Another question?
Just a very quick question about load balancing.
Yeah.
Windows Azure service. How configurable is it?
You can't configure it at all.
Right.
Okay. So what you do is if you say you've got 3 websites, all 3 of those websites will be connected to the load balancer. That's all you can say. The algorithms which are used inside the website aren't published because if they were published, it would mean that developers would develop their applications based on that algorithm. That means that we could never change the algorithm, or we'd have to inform every developer and give them time to change their code so that we could change the algorithm. The algorithms for how a node is selected change pretty much on a daily, sometimes a weekly basis. So you've got this constantly evolving operation inside the data center. So what you buy is a service. You don't buy, the way it works. You just buy the results that you get.
So it's more or less replicating what you would do in the real world in terms of if you've got 3 boxes and a load balancer, you still have to deal with that issue. It's just that that issue's moved up into the web.
Exactly, yeah. But you know, some load balancers will do things like they will say, well, you know, if that client is sending a request, I will always route that client to that particular box. And that means that you don't have to do session state management. But you know, that then gives you a problem because, I mean, when you start to think about the number of problems that that introduces, they start to get quite large. And so we start to, you know, to think about very loosely coupled applications because they scale really nicely. You can add extra boxes in and it just automatically scales everything across.
Okay, another question with the hypervisor. Can you run hypervisor on your laptop, for example, and create a VM that's compatible with when you upload it?
You can, but you can't create a VM that is compatible with a Windows Azure website because you can't. One of the things you can't do with a Windows Azure website is put your own VM into that infrastructure.
Oh, but there's the other thing, the other kind of.
Yeah, Windows Azure VMs. Okay, so there's a thing called Windows Azure Virtual Machines. You can create a hypervisor, you know, a Hyper-V machine, get the VHD, copy the file to the Windows Azure data center, and hit the boot button, and it will boot up inside the data center.
So a normal hypervisor, you can actually download and run on so Windows 7. You don't have to run it on. It's not like a special install.
No, Hyper-V runs on Windows Server 2008, 2012, and Windows 8. You have to run Virtual PC on Windows 7. Well, I think it's only, is this right? It's only 32-bit? I think you can only run 32-bit, which means you can only run 32-bit operating systems on it. So you're kind of, if you've got Windows 7 as your client, you can't create your machine and copy it up.
Windows 8 and then just download the hypervisor.
Well, the hypervisor is part of Windows 8, so you just have to enable it as a role in the machine itself. Okay. So then you can move over to reserved, and what happens with reserved is that there's this hypervisor infrastructure, thousands and thousands of machines, and there are thousands and thousands of VMs sat there waiting for somebody to say, I'd like to create a website. I'd like to create a website. I'd like to create a website. So they're all set there waiting. The Fabric selects a running VM, provisions your website, and then connects it up to the load balancer. So you now have a virtual machine which is utterly and totally dedicated to you. So that machine, nobody else's code is going to go on that machine. And in fact, the network segment, if you scale this up to 3 machines, the network segment it's on is also isolated. So there's no route, there's no network mechanism to get from somebody else's machine in the data center somewhere into this infrastructure. So whenever you have a number of websites, whether it's in shared or reserved, you will always be on a network segment which does its best to isolate itself from everybody else. Now, when you're in a shared environment, it has to share it across the number of VMs that everybody else is sharing. But when you're in the reserved environment, it's utterly, totally private to you. So you would have, in that case, a network with 3 nodes on it. Perhaps a few more nodes than that because there will be switches and routers to connect all these things together. But in terms of actual compute nodes, a network with 3 nodes on it, and that will be dedicated to you.
So would that be seen as your subnet?
Yeah, well, they all will run in a subnet, and you'll be granted one single IP address for the outside world. So what happens is the requests come in, they hit this one IP address is connected to the load balancer to the internet. They hit that, and it's the load balancer's job to decide where it's going to route this request, this internet request.
Can we have them on the SSL?
What kind of availability will that give us?
Okay, the guaranteed availability that you get for shared and for free and shared is 99.9%. If you go into reserved mode and you have more than one instance, then it's 99.95% availability. So there's a service level agreement on that. I'm going to have to go back and do that slide there again. Look. So when you deploy, you get your website, and you can either FTP the website, get all your files and FTP them into the www root directory. That's one way of doing it. The next way is to use web deploy, and for that, they've made it really simple because the publish settings profile, there's a file which has got all the publish settings in it. You can download that from the website, plug it into Visual Studio or Web Matrix or TFS or whatever tool you're using, and that will then allow you to hit the publish button and publish your stuff to your website. You can use Git, so you can do a Git push and push your code from Git up to the machine, and you can use TFS. I've noticed with TFS, because you know, Team Foundation servers, you know, like you can check out, write some code, check it back in again, so it's a code management system. But it can also automate the process of building and deploying your Windows Azure code. The process of building and deploying can take a few minutes. So, you know, it's just, and obviously with a big project with lots of people contributing to it, you know, trying to work out what's going on there and then have a build process on the back end of a complete team project is going to take a little bit longer than just going into Visual Studio and going publish, deploy. I'll do a demo of it. In fact, I'm not going to do a demo of it. I'm not going to do a live demo. I'm going to show you a video of the TFS thing, which I recorded last night, because there's a lot of just hanging around there waiting for things to happen. So through the magic of video editing, you will see this happen much more quickly than you could ever do it. You'll go, wow, that was really quick. You just click that button and it happened. But it's not like that in real life. Okay, then we have a partner gallery. So we've done a lot of work with the third-party sort of platforms that exist out there. So, for example, this is just showing like .NET, Nuke, Drupal. I think that's Composite and Joomla. You know, they're all content management, blog, and commerce type systems, open source systems. So we've worked with them. And actually, because we support Web Deploy, you can also use Web Deploy with those, because Web Deploy is a Windows Azure and the tool that you use to write your website, Visual Studio or Web Matrix. You know, it's one of those sorts of things. So actually, the fact that we've got something that runs on an IIS website, which happens to be deployed to a Windows Azure website, means that Web Deploy will also work. So that's quite neat. Right, I think it's time for some demos now. Yeah.
What databases do you support? Just SQL Server?
So we, I don't know. I'll have to I'll take that as a question afterwards and get your email, and I'll answer that afterwards. Never even thought about that before, actually. So I'll find the answer to that question.
So do you get full access to the root? So if you did install one of those WordPress things, would it put a folder in your root with that in?
Well, I'll show you, actually, because I've got one deployed, but you'll see there's a www root directory, and hanging off that is all the rest of your, you know, if you've got WordPress, then all the folders and the code that exists for WordPress. So it's www root that is the root of your directory. You can't go any higher than that. No. In fact, you can go one level up. It says site, I think it says site, and then it says www root, and that's where your site itself is. Right, where's my mouse gone? So let's just create one first of all then. So if I go in, this is the Windows Azure portal, you know, and some of you have been asking questions about things which are slightly outside of websites. So for example, if you want a virtual machine, you'd go into virtual machines here and you would do new compute virtual machine from the gallery, and you could pick one of these machines. So you could pick maybe an OpenLogic CentOS 6.3 Linux server or an Ubuntu Linux server. You could pick a 2008 server or a 2012 server. I've got my own images here, so these are ones which I've sys-prepped with SharePoint on them. So I've got pre-built images with SharePoint that I would just configure. And then everything I've ever deployed, I've never deleted anything. So everything I've ever deployed is here in this big list of disks. So anything that I've deployed in the past, I could just deploy that again if I wanted to.
That's stored on your PC or?
No, that's all in the cloud, and I'm actually paying for the storage as well. It's about 10 cents per gigabyte per month to you know, pay for these things, and each of these is about 20 gigabytes. So I'm paying like, you know, $1 a month for each of these machines that I'm keeping here. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. The other thing was cloud services. So cloud services, create a cloud service, and it will allow me to do a create, and it says to me, what do you want the URL to be? Where do you want it to be deployed? And then I can deploy a cloud service package. I'm not going to do that. In fact, if any of you were here on the talk on Tuesday, I did a quick demo of that. Okay, so we're interested in websites. So we go website, and this, the whole idea of this is really quick and easy. So I say new, compute, website, quick create, custom create, or from the gallery. Let's do a custom create. I'll give it a URL. So let's call this DevWeek websites. It's going to be devweekwebsites.azurewebsites.net. That will be its URL as far as Microsoft is concerned. I can give that a much nicer URL by use of CNAME record, and I'll do a demo of that a little bit later on. I've got a domain registered at GoDaddy, and I can get that domain to be the domain which is used for my Azure website. I then specify what my subscription is. Then I get a range of locations I can deploy to. 2 in the US, 1 in Asia, and 1 in Europe. Websites, at the moment, they're a preview feature. They're not a generally available, fully function. They're not on general availability yet. So when that happens, you'll see all of the 8 data centers will be available in this list when we go to general availability. I won't bother with a database, and I won't publish from source control. I'll just say I'd like to create that website. So.
Just a very quick one. For websites, is it possible to select multiple data centers? If you've got like an international website, you might want to host some VMs in one data center, say in the US, some in Europe, maybe you've got
No, when you create a website, which means you're going to have one IP address for your website, whether it's running on one VM or running on multiple VMs, that will be in a data center. So you could deploy exactly the same website to another data center, and then you can use another tool we've got called Traffic Manager, which is a DNS solution, and you can set a policy to round robin between the 2 data centers. Of course, then you've got a little tiny bit more of a problem because they're probably writing to a database, and the 2 databases are now independent of each other. So you could use data sync to try and synchronize the databases. And then you've got a little bit of a problem of what if that one updates the same record as this one here, who wins? So, all the usual sort of architectural problems that you have with these distributed systems, they don't get solved specifically by Windows Azure. It's just the fact that you go click, 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 and things happen.
A quick question with the database there. Would that be just like an normal SQL?
Yeah, I can just create a new database or a new MySQL database, and it will just go away and it will create that for me so I can use it. What effectively is saying is that do you want us to think of your database and your website as being one complete sort of bit of infrastructure, and we'll put them all in the same infrastructure for you and treat them as the same thing? Okay, but I'm creating a really simple database, so I'm not going to do that. I'll click OK here. Okay, so it says it's creating the website. Let's just see how long it takes. That's 8 seconds. So that was about 10 seconds to create the website. Okay, so now in theory I've got a URL here. I can go to that URL and I should be able to see my website. There it is. So any of you in the room could hit that URL there, devweekwebsites.azurewebsites.net, and you will see the website that I've just created. That is a free website. I'm not paying for this. All I need is a Windows Azure subscription of some type. It could be a free subscription, could be a paid subscription, whatever it is. I will get that website for free. Okay, now obviously I want to put some actual content into this thing, so let's go and have a look at how we could do that. If I go into the portal for the website itself, then the dashboard allows me to do various things. There's sort of tasks down here. It gives me some sort of usage statistics, data out, data in, file system storage, all those kind of things. But it also says here, for example, I've got an FTP host name. So I could go to that from an FTP client. So if I just take that name and I open up an FTP client, I use FileZilla. So I can go to that host. That's the host name. So what's the username? That's back in the portal. Come back here. Got to find it. Can you see username anywhere? Where is it? Oh yeah, here we go. So it's called DevWeek websites /AZ Planky. So let's copy that. And this is a this password that I'm about to use is different to the one for the portal. Okay? So let's go into FileZilla, put the username in, and the password, well, I don't actually know what the password is yet, so I'm going to reset the credentials for that. It says, what do you want your new password to be? I'll type one in here. So this means now that the developer who's creating the website, you could give him the password for the FTP client so he could get his content into it. He doesn't need to have the password to the portal and therefore be able to manage all your other websites. Okay, so let's put the password in here. Oh, mouse is just about to fall off. Sorry? Yes, you can disable it. Yep. There's okay, I won't show you how to do that, but there's a configuration option that you have to specify. Okay, so this is what you get now. Now, if this was on multiple websites, all of this is in a back-end storage which is common to all. Let's just say I had 3 instances, 0, 1, and 2. Then they all see this common file storage at the back end. And so if I go into the site, www.root, that's just that hosting start.html is the page that we saw already. So I could, for example, I'm pretty sure on my desktop I've got a HTML. I've got this hello.html file here. It just says that's there, really simple file. Hello world, HTML hello world. I know there should be a body in there, but it still works if you do that anyway. So let's go into the desktop on the left-hand side here. Pick that file up. This will update in a minute. There it is. And let's just drag that into the www.root directory. So now, if I go back to my website and just say hello.html, it's working. So, you know, that's kind of that's the really simplest way of creating a web or creating content into your website. Now the next way is to use web deploy. So if we fire up Visual Studio, create a new project. Let's call this what did I call it? DevWeek website. No, I called it websites, didn't I? DevWeek websites. DevWeek websites. ASP.NET Web Forms app, that'll do. Okay, so now what I should be able to, let's actually make some modifications to this so we can see that it is genuinely the site that I'm playing with here. Get rid of all of that. Let's get rid of all of this as well. Okay, imagine that was thousands of lines of code. So now this is the web deploy option. So I now need to import a publish profile. I could actually go through the whole process of creating a profile, but I'm going to import one, and I've got one on my website. So up here it says download the publish profile. So I'll just put that into the same directory. I'll put that I think that one points to my projects directory in Visual Studio. What did I call it? DevWeek. Oh, what's happened there then? DevWeek websites I called it. I've just lost the download screen. Oh, there it is, DevWeek websites. Okay, so that's my Visual Studio 2012 projects directory. I'll put my publish settings file in there. And now if I go back here and import that file, so what am I looking for? Users. That's me. Azure Studio projects, DevWeek websites, and there's that publish profile. So all I'm going to do now is just hit the publish button. So we'll watch the state that's down here. It's built. It's starting the publish process. So this is this why it's called web deploy. It's a protocol that's got the two ends talking to each other about how to get this content up there. Okay, so now if I refresh, we should have my new website up there. Okay, so that's really quite simple. So it took not very long at all. I mean, I could have written a nicer website, but the whole idea of this is that you spend the time creating the website, not going through the process of creating the entry up on the Azure site and then publishing it. Right, so let me just quickly show you another way of deploying, which is I'm going to show you a video for this. Whoops, I don't want to close all tabs. I'm just going to close that one. So the first thing is to go to Tfs Online, and that's at, let's wait for that to clear, tfs.visualstudio.com. I've already created an account there, so I'll sign into it. And that's Planky at plankytronics.com. Okay, this takes me to my particular account, and you can see there's an old demo there. I'm going to delete that one, and we'll create a brand new team project, and I'll call this DevWeek Demo, or DevWeek Demo 2, DevWeek Demo 2, and create the project. Okay, so we can now navigate to the project. We'll open a new instance of Visual Studio. So this will fire up Visual Studio for us. And this is the place which we create our project. So let's say new project, ASP.NET Web Forms application, DevWeek Demo 2. So there is our solution. Let's go into the Solution Explorer, and let's say add solution to source control. There is the project, DevWeek Demo 2. Say OK to that. And then let's go to the Team Explorer. Let's go to Pending Changes. So let's say this is the comment we want to attach, which is initial project creation, and we'll check that in. Okay, so I'm going to include all. I've already included all the excluded changes. I'm including all of them. I think we're almost done. Okay, so we have successfully checked in all of those changes, which it was an initial project creation. Now the thing we need to do is go and create a corresponding Windows Azure cloud service, well in fact a website. So we go to manage.windowsazure.com. This is logging me in through Corporate Federation, so I don't need to provide any credentials because I'm currently logged into my corporate Active Directory. Okay, so first thing to do now is to create a new website, custom create, And I'll call this DevWeek Demo 2. It can go on to my internal subscription, North Europe, which is in Dublin. And notice on the right hand side of this box here, if I go published from source control, I get an extra page to go to. If I clear that, it disappears. If I click that, it gives me a page to go to. And that means I can now set up the TFS components. So I've got to tell it what my site, what my Team Foundation server is, and authorize it. So I do that. And then I've got to set up the actual publishing itself. So I've got a number of different projects here. These are ones that I've been playing with already. So we'll deal with DevWeek Demo 2 and say OK to that. So now it's in the process of creating the website, and we're going to have to get it all linked up. OK, so we've now got a running website. We click in here, go to the deployments, we can see that it's linked to plankytronics.visualstudio.com, which is my TFS service. If I now say I want to check in on Visual Studio 2012, close that one down because this makes it a bit neater if I fire it up from here. Okay, let's now open our project, and let's make a small change. So let's just remove this text. Let's also remove this stuff. And let's put a piece of text here to say modified site. Okay. And we'll go into our source control explorer. We'll find our project. There it is. And drill into it. Pick up the solution file. Say we want to save those changes that we just made. Very odd. Ah, that's better. And now let's do pending changes. And let's say that we modified the home page. And let's check in. And I'm just going to check that I've got include all excluded changes. So we're now, we've got everything successfully checked in. What we want to do now is monitor the build process, because this has been set up to automatically build. So let's look at the builds. Look at my builds. There's my project. And we'll just monitor it in this pane in Visual Studio. Okay, so you'll gradually see this pane gradually fill out as more information gets populated into it. I'll use the magic of video editing to speed this process up, because it can take quite some time from time to time. Okay, one thing you can see here is this bit where it says fetch the Windows Azure site publish profile, the Windows Azure website publish profile. Okay, so let's have a look at that. It says we had 0 errors, 0 warnings, everything was done. So that means we should now be able to go to the website. We can see in the portal it says we have an active deployment. It was deployed by TFS, and we should now be able to go to the URL for that site. Let's click that and see it running. And there we can see it running. Modified site with the changes that I made to the site. So, you know, we could have our team working on that, checking code in and going through a complete build process and automatically continuously integrating that build process with Windows Azure, making the whole experience rather nice and connected. Good. Okay, so the next bit I want to show is, I've got a list of one of the things I want to show here, is in the portal how we'll scale the site. So if I go back to that site there, and we got this button here which says scale. And I was talking about, you had free, shared, and reserved modes of operation. So at the moment we're running in free mode, we can only have one instance. If I go to shared mode, then I can increase this. Let's go to say 3 instances. So that means that I will have my website on a server with other people's websites, and that will be replicated 3 times and all be connected up to the load balancer. Now, actually, before I do that, let me just go back to free again. What I'll do in Visual Studio is just let's put a oops. Where have I gone? Where default? Oh, isn't it awful when the screen is this small because of the projector? Right. What I'm going to do is I'll just put a label in there. And then let's say that label1.text is equal to the machine name. Okay, so when the page loads, we're going to find out what the machine name is when we run this this piece of code. Let's just make sure it runs properly on the local machine here. You'll see what my machine name is called, which should come up with the local machine name when I run this. So it's Planky 8540W8. So that's Planky, my name, 8540. This is a Hewlett Packard HP 8540 and W8 for Windows 8. So you'll get to find out what the format of the machine names are in Windows Azure when we deploy this to Windows Azure. So let me close that down. Let me go back to my solution and publish it.
So if you were deploying from something like web expression, would you still have those kind of publish features, or would you have to use?
I don't. You're on about Expression Web. I don't know if that's got web deploy support in it or not. Does anybody know? I mean, if it's got web deploy support in it, it should be the same, but I don't actually know. Perhaps that's another question you could point for me at the end, like somebody else had a question, and I'll make notes of them. Right, okay, so that is we don't want that one anymore. That site there is the free website, okay? So if we now go here, and we go to shared, and we say we want 3 instances, and we save that. So what it's going to do now is it's going to move it from that infrastructure into a shared infrastructure and put it onto 3 separate machines. So when that's completed, see how long that takes. This thing down here is telling me the progress, so that's done. So if I now go and let me go back, let me just get the URL and open it in a new tab here. So the machine name is RD00155 blah 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 blah. It ends with 054. Oh, and that one also ends with 054. Oh, sorry. Because we're in the shared, my apologies, because we're in the free infrastructure, we're in the shared infrastructure, and the load balancer is preferring to send traffic to this machine. If we, however, now go to the reserved infrastructure, it has to move all of that over to the completely reserved infrastructure where you only get one website on where your website goes onto the VM which is allocated to you. So let's do that next. Come over here and I say reserved, and let's specify that we want, say, 3 instances. This is where I can specify the size of the VM that's going to host this. And at the moment, I can only choose small, medium, or large. That's either 1 core, 2 cores, or 4 cores, and between 1.75 gigs and 7 gigs of RAM. There are other sizes as well. There's an extra small, and there is an extra large. When we go to general availability in the spring, there will be extra large up there, and that is a 14 gig 8 core machine. And of course, you know, if you've got lots of those, then that's actually a reasonably powerful website. And what we're doing I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the spring, but there is a desire to introduce even more powerful machines as we go forward. So you'll see the range of machines. I don't know what they're going to call it, extra, extra large, extra, 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 extra large. That's what they're going to have to do as time goes on, isn't it? Or maybe they'll redefine the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Has it done it? No, it's down here, look. Sorry? Say that again? Yeah, they did that a little while ago, didn't they? Yeah, yeah. Isn't there? And there's something called huge as well, isn't there? There's something. Or was that might be something that's going to happen, but they're going to introduce a huge size, and you'll have to pay a real big premium for that because it's for, you know, really heavily intensive compute type workloads.
So how do you actually work out from a traditional lumper PC to a VM what's good enough for your needs? How would you like? Do you just load test it?
Yeah, I mean that's with any infrastructure, it's the only way to work it out. What you need is to load test it, isn't it? Because under real conditions with real people using it. But yeah, I mean you have to have some sort of vague idea where to start, don't you? And I kind of start with a medium VM, or if it's a really lightly used website, then you probably would get away with a small quite easily, I would think. Yeah, I'll show you that in a few moments. Okay, so did I save that? I must have saved it because the save button's not there anymore. So if we go back here and refresh, I'm expecting to see the machine name change.
Excuse me, you've got the leases free, so how long is it free for?
Well, in the initial announcement, it's free for 12 months, but I mean, the word on the street is that it'll be free for as long as you have a subscription. But at the moment, it says that it's free for 12 months. I can't imagine that they'll then start charging you for it, because you just go and get another free subscription and fire another load off, wouldn't you? Okay, so the name's just changed there, 0479 now. So that kind of is the proof, if you like, that we've gone from one infrastructure over to another infrastructure, and we're on a completely different VM there. But there's the original one, 1054. There's the new one, 40479. And you're on 47D. So because we're load balanced, so you've gone to that machine. Now, if I was to go there, if I do another refresh, I'll do Control F5, so it's a proper refresh. It'll take me back to the same machine because it's trying to keep a sticky session. It's trying to say that's good. But if the rest of you were to try it, you'd probably find that you may end up on that machine. But you know, you said 47D for you, and you're probably back on there again when you refresh. Yeah. But if we were all to get really busy with this site and make it busy, then it would start having to move the connections around, and you might not end up back on the same site or the same instance every time. Okay, so the monitoring is, so what will be happening in the future is, you know, what's it called? The System Center monitoring tools, which are used for monitoring internal infrastructure. You can already link them up with Windows Azure websites and Windows Azure virtual machines. Today, you can't link them up with Windows Azure websites. So the monitoring that we have for these is built into this tool here. And this is the range of monitoring that you have. This is the entirety of the monitoring that you have. So you've got things like CPU time, data in, data out, server errors, and requests. And you can specify which one of these you want to see on the graph. And it will keep that, and that graph will just stay there forever. And also this data is available in what is called the Windows Azure diagnostic. So we won't cover it today, but there's a way of getting that diagnostic information so that you can get like event log errors and so on.
Can you get alerts emailed to you?
No, you can't. You could write an application that you deploy into this thing to get that to happen, but you can't have that automatically. But again, alerts is on the roadmap. So it won't be in the spring though, it'll be sometime after that. So if we have a look here, we can see, I'm just showing requests here, so it says 78 requests. So if I go back to my website and start refreshing it, let's just Control F5 because I know that it goes all the way to the website when you do that. It seems to be going really quickly.
Shouldn't say it like that. Say, hey, quick is good.
Yeah, normally quick is good, isn't it? And if I refresh this page, that request number should probably go up.
Is your headphone jack
Oh yeah, it is. Shall I? I could just. That's better, isn't it? Okay, so the total number of web requests has gone up. We could look at, for example, data out. So I got like 1.66 megabytes of data has come out. If I just refresh these pages a bit more. 2, 3, 4, 5. It's nice when all the .NET stuff gets spun up because it's nice and quick then, isn't it? When you first use it, it's really slow. So 1.66 megabytes, then we're... Any second now. 3.66 megabytes now. So you can see how much data you're actually using, and this this graph will just expand as the timeline expands. Okay. Now, the next thing I just want to show is I've already got a website deployed. This one here, it's called Error Site. Do you think there might be an error on that site? So if I actually go to that site, notice it's going to errors.plankytronics.net as well. Okay, so that's got a more interesting name than errorsite.azurewebsites.net. Its true name is errorsite.azurewebsites.net, but I've mapped another domain name onto it, and I'll come onto that in a few more moments. Okay, this one hasn't run since last night, so it's going to... In fact, no, this one's not going to work. So I've got HTTP 403 here. So how would I troubleshoot this? Because one of the things I can't do with this machine is I can't RDP into the box. So I can go to the logs, and I can use FTP to go to the logs. So this is one of the other things that I was saying, that System Center will be able, what we will be able to do in the late summer release, not in the spring release, is connect System Center up to this sort of thing. So we will be able to monitor all of this stuff and have a System Center console readout of it. Also, there are other vendors who are building management tools. So you may have come across a company called Cerebrata. They were acquired by Redgate about a year ago. They've got a couple of tools. They've got a diagnostic management tool and storage management tool. So there's a couple of quite good tools that you can also use. So let's connect. It's disconnected. I think it's timed out. I bought the previous connection. Ugh, postpone that. Right, am I now connected? Right, okay. So if I go into the log files directory here, it says it's empty. Sorry? Oh yeah, I knew that. I knew that. I was just testing you to see how long it would take you to spot it, and I was surprised at how long it took actually. Right, so let's go in here. Whoops. So I want to get the host name, and the username is errorsite/azplanky. In fact, I can leave the azplanky there, can't I? Error site, and I'll need to set the password up as well, so I'll have to reset the credentials. Sorry? Sorry, I completely missed all of that. Oh, did I? All right, I'll fix that when I go back. Right, so, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Error site. Right, so I'll connect to a different site. Yeah. Oh, something I've forgotten actually, which is over in the configure option over here, if I want to get error information, I need to actually switch the logging on. So I switch the logging on for these things. Web server logging, detailed error messages, and failed request tracing. Just while we're here, you can also see that I get a choice of which framework I want to use, and also for PHP. I can, because if I'm going to deploy a certain application which needs one of those frameworks, I can specify that. Okay, let's save that. let's then also, now that that's saved, let's go back to that page there and refresh so we get this error again. So we should get another 403. Yeah, let's just do it one more time just to be sure. Right. Then if I go back to the portal, sorry, to FileZilla, and it's still not connecting, is it? Could not connect to server. Let me just check I've got the right name here. Right. Let me get that FTP name again. FTP host name. Error site AZ Planky. That's correct, isn't it? Right, let's connect again. Right, that's a bit better. So now we can go into the log files, and you know I can look at the sort of the XML in here, and I can tell you, just in the sake of time, I can tell you it gives me a massive amount of information, but none of it is useful to try and find out what this problem is about. I can go into the HTTP errors and I can have a look at the raw logs, and this will give me lots of information, but it's not any help in finding the error. But if I go into the detailed errors log here, I think, let's just try the last one. I think this one will probably tell us. Oh, that's just copied it to my desktop, I think. Error, can you see it anywhere? Oh, thank you. Is it going to open? Okay, the web server is configured to not list the contents of this directory. So if it's not going to list the contents of the directory, where's the default document? So you know, it's kind of like, this is my little troubleshooting thing. So, oh, if it's not going to list the directory, then surely it would have listed the default document. So let's go and check that. So we go back to the websites thing here. We go into the configure tab, and we'll find that actually I have no default documents specified at all. So the default document for this website is default.aspx. So let's put that in. Default.aspx. I think I just move off it or hit save. Oh, was it? Oh yeah. Let's delete that one and do it again. Default.aspx. Got that right, haven't I? Save. Okay, so now if I go back to that site, not that one. Was it that one there? That one there, and refresh, we should get the default site. Okay, so it says it's all working now, and it's got these other bits of information here. It says Elvis Presley and Tony Blair. What's that about? So one of the things that you might want to be able to do is to, you know, for somebody who's responsible for managing the Windows Azure infrastructure that you use, to be able to manage it, and for the people who are developing the websites to be given the projects to develop, and then you deploy the website that they've created. Now this means that if you've got some sort of configuration information or secrets or passwords or connection strings or those sorts of things, that typically they would be able to see that kind of information because they probably put it into web config or some configuration file or some, you know, they'd put it somewhere where they could probably see it. So what you can do with Windows Azure is in a, let me find a project that I've got. Let me close that one down first. I want to find that error sites project. Well, I just closed them all down then. There's the error site project. It's just an ASP.NET website. But can you see in the web.config, we've got these settings here. In the app settings, we've got a key called Site Settings 1 and Site Settings 2. And the values they've been set to is Jonathan Decay, Johnny Rotten, and Michael Jagger, Mick Jagger. So if I run this locally on my local machine, it comes up and it should say on the web page Jonathan Decay and Michael Jagger. So let's just make sure it does. And that's what it does. So what the code itself actually does, it's just a oops, let's find it in my file over here. You can see all it's doing. Can you see it? Response.write system.configuration.configuration manager app settings. And I get the 0th and the first element from the from that array, and I can print that stuff out. Now, when I deploy this to Windows Azure, it's not going to look in the web.config file. It's going to look to what I have put in the portal. So if I now go to the portal, here we go, portal. You can see here I've put some app settings in here. Site setting 1, so it's got exactly the same name as what's in the web.config. Site setting 2 has got exactly the same name as what's in the app.config. And you can see I've set those names to Elvis Presley and Tony Blair. So let's put David Cameron in here. And what should we have this one as? Some other musician. Bill Haley. I'm not a 1950s rock and roll fan, by the way. Okay, so now if I refresh the page, that's the one, isn't it? So it should come up with 2 different names now. That's right, because the way that this works, in fact, the way that it works is kind of really complicated behind the scenes, but effectively what you've done is I've used web deploy. The web deploy endpoint has taken that and has said, right, I know what this is aimed at, and I know where all that infrastructure is located, and I know where its back-end storage is. And so it puts it into the back-end storage, which is available to all 3 instances, because I've got 3 instances running. Okay, so I've just got this quite a neat separation between people who write code and do configuration in the actual project and people who are managing the website. You probably saw there that I've got similar sort of setup for connection strings. In fact, if I put the, is it going to work in that one? Say if I was doing SQL Azure. No, I can't remember how to do it now. It's a little while since I used it, but I think if I put password in here. Now there's a way you can get it so that you can't actually, so the password that you type in actually comes up as a series of asterisks. I can't quite remember what it is right off the top of my head. I'm going to make sure I don't save any of that. Go to a different page. Go there. Right. Okay, so the next thing is DNS name mapping. So how do you do that? So if I go to the DNS name, it's in here somewhere, manage domains. So what this is saying is, it's the wrong website, sorry, the one I want to go to is the error site. So if I go to manage domains here, it says the real domain name is errorsite.azurewebsites.net, but I've said that I'd like to also have this website called errors.plankytronics.net. So you know how IIS works. When it receives a request from the internet, you could just supply an IP address if you wanted to and just send that GET request to that IIS server. And if there's a default website there, that's the response that you'll get. But if you want to have multiple websites all going on the same port, then what do? You use host headers. So in the host header of the GET request is the name of the site that you're going to. And so you have to give the site name, or you have to give the list of sites that are supported on this site. That's basically how we're doing it. So we're actually putting our host header support through that into our IIS website. Now that means that I also need to have some way of mapping that. And I use GoDaddy, and that's just timed out, but let me try it again. let me close that one down and go straight to that one there. So GoDaddy is a DNS name registrar, and I've got an account with them. So I've got a site, or I've got a domain called plankytronics.net, plankytronics with 2 X's. My host name goes to this IP address, but I can also create these special types of records, CNAME records, canonical name records, and they're kind of a little bit like pointers. So if I come down here and find errors, so I have a subdomain within my domain called errors. So I have a site which is called errors.plankytronics.net, and that maps to errorsite.azurewebsites.net. You see how that works? So the way that DNS works is that if you type in, let's just say that I type in errorsite.azurewebsites.net. I type that in. The DNS resolver in the client will then go to the configured DNS server and say, can you find this name for me? If it doesn't know the answer, it may refer the client to the root of the internet, the dot. And then if that says it's at azurewebsites.net, then it's going to refer me to Azure Websites, which may be able to find the answer. So there's this referral mechanism that moves around the internet and finds for you the answer to give the IP address of the system that you need. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go to errors.plankytronics.net, and I'm eventually going to end up at GoDaddy's website. Okay? GoDaddy's website is going to return not an IP address, it's going to return a CNAME record. So the DNS client in your machine gets a CNAME record back which says this is errorsite.azurewebsites.net. So it thinks, well, that's not an IP address, and I need an IP address. It then therefore does another query into DNS, and the DNS infrastructure that's around the world will go all the way through the various bits and pieces and will find the answer to the IP address of that site. That comes back to the client. So now the client knows where to send this HTTP request. So it formulates an HTTP request. It takes the DNS name of the host that you typed into the web browser, puts that into the host header, and remember that was errors.plankytronics.net, and it sends it to the IP address it got, and the IP address was the IP address for errorsite.azurewebsites.net. So that's the request that goes off to the site, and the site, because it's configured to accept requests for errors.plankytronics.net, will quite happily accept them and pass them on to the correct website. But you do need, in this case, to get an entry with another DNS provider for that to work. And the final thing that I want to show you in about the last 3 minutes is the stuff that we're doing with the partners. So I've just lost the management page. It's not down here anywhere, is it? Oh, no. Manage dot. So I've already got a WordPress blog deployed here, but I'll show you how you would create one. I'm not going to go through the whole process of creating it. So I go into websites and I'd say new website, and I go down here from gallery. So if I go to the gallery, that gives me a list of all the companies that we've partnered with. Now, I could go to let's just say just blogs, or just CMS systems, or just forums, and so on. But let's stick with blogs. So say if I was interested in doing a WordPress blog, then I'd go through this process, and it just basically is going to walk me through the whole process and say, how do you want to create this site? Which data center do you want to put it into? Now, I've already created one, and that is this one here, Azure Camps UK. So if we go to the Azure Camp, let me just show it to you. I could, for example, click Install Web Matrix here, and it will allow me to deal with this website as if it is a Web Matrix website, or I could do it with Visual Studio. So if I now go and have a look at this site, let's go back here. Sorry, wrong one. Now this is a site you can come to if you want to find out about training and stuff like that we're doing. So there's a kind of nice segue into one of the questions that came up earlier. So this is a WordPress blog. You can see we've got a couple of things that are going on in the UK. One is called Windows Azure camps that we do. So there's, you know, stuff here, and people were saying about how do you know what to install on your machine. That's all on here. This is the setup instructions. And then we've got another program called 6 Steps to Windows Azure. And this is, it's actually almost coming to the end now. I think we've got the last session coming up in a few weeks' time. So if you're interested in more stuff to do with, you know, training and so on, this is the page to come to. If you want to create your own WordPress blog, you just go into the Azure websites and just run through the process, and it will create the blog for you and end up in the management page. Question?
You must manage the WordPress site through WordPress. You said
absolutely, yeah.
Tfs web matrix. There's nothing to manage, unless you're
okay.
giving people access to the raw files inside the WordPress application, which would seem.
So we do give you access to the raw files in the WordPress application, because if you want to make code changes, then you can. I'm just running out of time here, but if you use Web Matrix, for example, we worked with all of the different vendors who've got stuff in the portal. So what you'll see, the icons that you'll see on all of the files that are in Web Matrix, is they've got a padlock on, a grayed out padlock, which is WordPress have suggested that you don't modify this file. Any files that don't have a padlock on them, you're free to do whatever you want. Now, you can modify those files if you want to, and in fact, I modified the header file the other day to give me a cycling, you know, the header picture, to give me a rotating one of those every hour. But it's just their suggestion is that you don't hack around with these files, because they're kind of fundamental to the working of the system. So that's one thing. But if I go to this site and I go to the WordPress admin page, just like a normal WordPress site, then I can log in as admin, and I can manage this. That's a bit odd. Okay, I can't have forgotten my password. Right, so I can just manage this like a normal WordPress blog. Okay, I think that's basically it. Let me just hit the very last slide, which has just got what we covered. So what we did was we had a look at moving up the food chain, websites in seconds. You know, the whole idea is to concentrate on that bit at the very top, which is the website code, deploying the website, not all of the infrastructure that lives below it. We then talked about, We then talked about scaling, and remember there's 3 modes. There's free, there's shared, and there's reserved. Reserved is the only one which gives you total isolation, because you get your website on a VM that you own. Shared means you can scale out, but you have to pay for it. And then free is completely free, but you only get 1 instance. You can have up to 10 websites, but those 10 websites are separate URLs. Okay, it's not as if you get 10 websites that you can all connect, free websites that you can connect to a load balancer. Then we talked about deploying a code, and we did it with FTP, web deploy. I didn't show anything with Git, but you can use Git and TFS. And finally, we had a look at the partner gallery and the types of things that you could do there. Great, okay, if you've got any questions, just hang around at the end and I'll answer them for you. Cheers.